faded away slowly but surely, to the point where new generations now find the figure laughable, where he was a menacing kind of fear-inducing figure to previous generations. When I was watching the movie with the students, they all laughed when the figure, it wasn't interpreted by an actor, but the images of Pinochet came on the screen, but they whistled or booed at Patricio Aylwin when his character was portrayed on the screen. So the idea being that Pinochet is a laughable figure in politics now, and the real moment to deal with on this, again, happening kind of after the mid-2000s, the real problems to deal with are going forward, the problems of a democratic Chile that has a social debt to pay. So Aylwin is a kind of bigger bad guy in some way than the forgotten Pinochet. So the implications for that, I think, are, I spoke with one person who did an interview, a formal interview with one person who was from the generation of the 1970s, late 1960s, 1970s, and he worked for this torture remembrance museum in downtown, and he couldn't speak more highly of the new leadership, right? And also giving them space to make this their own movement, right? As the president of the FEUC, the Católica Federation, said. So in that way, at least the strong Chilean left who went through the dictatorship isn't interpreting it as problematic as much as they're seeing it as the new kind of generation of potential politicians. And then of course he went back to kind of pick out a few people. Oh, this person's going to go far. This person's just a joker. So he was kind of spotting talent, I guess, in his thinking about the movement. So the old left or something is definitely looking at what the students are doing very seriously, but maintaining a distance. So, I know that most of you have to go, but I'll keep taking questions for people who are willing to stay.
I would like to ask you to sort of restate your hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
sort of a short version of your hypothesis about the role of social media in this, for this movement,
Mm-hmm.
in two senses. One, we know that there have been, social movements throughout history without social media at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not completely necessary or indispensable. And in the second sense, from a second perspective, there was lots going on, in the building of this movement. One is, the whole transition was sort of ending in a way. We have the first right-wing government after the dictatorship. There is an increase in income and increase in poverty that sort of creates new demands. So it's sort of a confounding process where social media is just one part. I don't know exactly where your hypothesis is in terms of what social media is actually doing for the movement or against the movement in this context.
Yeah, so I'm not claiming that social media or online social networks are the causal factor in creating social movement. I think they can help to explain why now. I think they can help. Chile is a country where by 2007 or 2008, it was the third largest penetration rate of Facebook, right? So early adoption of these sorts of technologies. The internet helped to spur along helped to add new voices and new possibilities for commentary during the 1998 arrest of Pinochet. So it's a country that, especially in the developing world, that has that possibility to use social media for political purposes. And surveys have borne out that social media users in Chile are doing that. But in terms of why it's important, I think partly because of the democratic kind of space and practices that it creates. People who are reading news for the first time. So I did a couple interviews with students who were not leaders and who were part of either a federation and not leading it, or I'd met them in the process, and I wanted to talk to them about how they use social media. And generally, they're doing it fairly fluidly while they're doing other things, like most of us are. But it's a space where something captures their attention, and they attend to it for potentially longer than they would other things. So they're looking then at news in El Mostrador where they wouldn't have been before and probably wouldn't have known about it. So in that way, and this is kind of the joke or something that I was making at the end about shopping malls is, and this harkens back to Lance Bennett, in these kind of post-industrial neoliberal societies, one of the challenges is for people who've begun to conceive of their citizenship as very personalized and individual to think in any sort of collective way. He argues that it provides this ability for personalized connective actions. So you can kind of say, I care about human rights because I wouldn't like to get tortured. And I know that's rather painting it with a broad brush, but the idea being that without a direct connection to it, you kind of have this very individualized imagination. And the idea of some sort of community forming around issues or some sort of old logic of like solidaritous collective action is hard to get in these societies. So, and the United States being another example of one of these societies. So what I'm arguing, trying to develop, is this idea that Bennett is potentially wrong and that this personalized form of politics is the only thing happening, and that through using these politics and building this sort of behavior of democratic activity, at least among some people, among people involved in the movement, that there's a potential for creating a larger solidarity. So students have made these sorts of private concerns about fees and, from 2006, bus passes, or about profit making at their institutions, about student loan interest rates, made them public by talking about the dictatorship, by talking about the transition to democracy, rather, by talking about both memory and the social kind of debt that they're challenging the government to take on. So in that way, I think it's different somewhat from kind of the recycle campaigns that tend to be more frequent in those sorts of societies and have also taken off in this same period. And I think social media in some way builds that. And I haven't really identified the mechanisms, so maybe that's the kind of problem of what I'm looking at. Well, thanks a lot for coming, guys. I really appreciate you staying out. If you have any other comments or questions, here's my email, and see many of you around campus, I'm sure.